Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the weeknight. I'm Simone Sanders Townsend with Alicia Menendez and Michael Steele. We have breaking news. MS Now confirms that the Trump Justice Department is investigating Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. The details in just a moment.
Plus, confronting ICE's brutal crackdown, Democrats holding a hearing today in Minneapolis. Congressman James Walkinshaw is there and is going to join us at the table soon.
Then disastrous new polling for Trump heading into 2026. And Chuck Schumer makes a bold prediction about the midterms. But folks, we're going to begin tonight with breaking news. MS Now has just confirmed Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey are under federal criminal investigation by the Trump Justice Department for allegedly obstructing federal immigration enforcement. That's according to two sources familiar with the matter. Frey's office tells us they've heard rumors, but have not received formal notice from DOJ on the matter. Just minutes ago, Governor Walz released this statement, quote, 2 days ago, it was Elisa Slotkin. Last week, it was Jerome Powell. Before that, Mark Kelly. Weaponizing the justice system and threatening political opponents is a dangerous authoritarian tactic. The only person not being investigated for the shooting of Renee Good is the federal agent who shot her. Let's bring in MS Now Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delanian. Ken, what can you tell us? What have you learned about this investigation?
Michael, details are pretty thin at this moment, but we do understand that grand jury subpoenas are being prepared if they haven't been issued already, although it's not clear that anyone has been served with those subpoenas. We understand that this is an investigation being run out of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minneapolis, and that one of the statutes they're looking at is USC 372, which makes it a crime to impede or assault an officer. And it's connected to, it appears to be connected to statements that the governor and the mayor have made encouraging people to exercise their rights, essentially, when it comes to immigration enforcement and the activities of ICE in the state. And a lot of people, as you just said, are going to see this as a weaponization of the Justice Department against political opponents. These are both Democrats, obviously, the mayor and the governor. But nonetheless, this investigation is proceeding, and we'll just have to see where it goes from here.
That's the question. Where does it go from here? What are the likely outcomes here? I'm sure the governor and the mayor plan some type of legal defense against this, but this seems to be a pattern. Is that what you're hearing on the ground, or what are the political stakes here?
Well, people inside the Justice Department that I talk to view this and these kinds of investigations as a corruption and a weaponization of the Justice Department. Because unless there's some secret evidence we don't know about, some secret conspiracy by the governor and the mayor to impede federal immigration officers, and I guess we shouldn't totally rule that out. We don't know what the full evidence is, but based on their public statements, it's hard to imagine what crimes they could be prosecuted for. It's hard to imagine this case ever getting to charges, but that may not be the point. Just the story suggesting that there's an investigation, grand jury subpoenas going to their offices demanding documents, that has an intimidating, chilling effect on people, and that power of the Justice Department, it's an awesome power, the power of the prosecutor to tar people's reputations. That's being wielded by this Justice Department against people who are on the other side of Donald Trump in political debates. We've never seen this before in American history, but we're sure are seeing it now, guys.
Ken, very quickly before we let you go, earlier this week, the heads of the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota, they resigned. So who is actually running point in the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office right now, or do we know?
I certainly don't know. That's a great question. Look, there's plenty of career people. There's probably an acting U.S. attorney. This investigation would involve the FBI, would involve a lot of different people. And normally that's a backstop against things going wrong or charges or investigations being moved forward without a predicate. But so many people have left the Justice Department under this administration, so many good, independent people that oftentimes what you have left are people who support the president and what he's trying to do, particularly in senior jobs in these U.S. attorneys' offices around the country. So that may be where we are in Minneapolis.
MS Now's Ken Delaney, and thank you so much for your time tonight, Ken, and your reporting. Let's bring in Andrea Flores. She is a former DHS and White House official, and she's founder of America's Promise. And MS Now political analyst Tim Miller, he hosts the Bulwark podcast.
Andrea, there is what the administration is doing as they go after governors and mayors, and then their ICE agents themselves. And this headline from the Minnesota Star Tribune, I have to be honest, it took my breath away. You had ICE agents eat at a small-town Mexican restaurant, then arrest workers. Federal agents detained 3 workers from a family-owned Mexican restaurant in Wilmer, Minnesota on Wednesday, hours after 4 agents ate lunch there. A handful of bystanders blew whistles and shouted at agents as they detained the people. Would your mama be proud of you right now? One of the bystanders asked. I mean, to sit in someone's restaurant, to allow them to serve you and then to return later in the day in order to apprehend them. I get that the cruelty is the point. I get that we have been saying that from the beginning, but it does feel that something has changed even in just the past few days, that these individual agents now seem incredibly emboldened.
They are incredibly emboldened. When we've seen every step this administration has taken after the death of Renee Good has been to blame the residents of Minnesota, blame the leaders in Minnesota and in Minneapolis, and to excuse and to send a signal to its agents on the ground that they can act however they want to. I think there was a term used, that they had absolute immunity. That term doesn't exist in the law, and they don't have absolute immunity. But like you said, the cruelty, yes, it is the point. But I'd like to remind everyone watching, what were those law enforcement officers doing, eating and then arresting, these people working the restaurant? If that doesn't show a lack of urgency around their supposed mission, I don't know what else would, right? If you're really trying to execute an immigration enforcement action, you're not going to casually eat in a restaurant and then go and approach your targets. This is just unheard of. This isn't immigration enforcement. It's not law enforcement. It's political intimidation. And I'm going to keep saying this. The president has weaponized the Department of Homeland Security and federal law enforcement to act as his own federal police force. If we don't name that for what it is, we'll keep falling into this trap of thinking that this is just an immigration issue. It's actually a constitutional issue about state police power versus federal police power. And there's not supposed to be this type of federal police power.
Can I just ask a question? I want to stay on that point for a second, Tim, because arrest them for what? Did they have a subpoena? Had they identified the workers in that restaurant as gang members or as felons or as individuals who are engaged in other illegal activity in this country, maybe belonging to a gang? You sat your ass down at their restaurant and ate their food. And then you come back with what? Where were the warrants? When you looked at that server in the face, did you know, oh, there's a criminal, let me go check some database because I recognize them from some other investigation? This is it's not just the cruelty is the point. It is just the sheer insanity that they think the rest of us are deaf, dumb, and stupid to what they're doing. I just don't understand how that happens, Tim. I mean, I've listened to you, and just put the right finger on the pulse here about what this really is in this moment.
Well, it's political, right? Like, this is a political effort, and it's also performative, right? It's politics and it's performance. It's not public safety. That's not what they're doing. They're saying that they're here to go after the worst, and they barely even pay lip service to that anymore. If they wanted to, figure out a way to just go after the worst people that have committed crimes here, they'd do what you're saying. They'd go get a warrant, right? If they wanted to deport the most people, but with the least disruption to communities, right, where there was no performance in it, what they would do is they would go to the big donors, right? They would go to the owners of, construction companies and agricultural plants, and they'd say, sorry, we can't, we need to come look at your employment records and go that way. But they don't want to do that because they don't want to anger, big supporters of the president. Mm-hmm. So instead what they're doing is this, they're going into these neighborhoods, they're going into the communities, they're menacing people. They want to scare people, and they also want to escalate. This Tim Walz, Fry DOJ effort is an effort to escalate, right? They want a response so they can crack down harder. That's what they're doing. It's politics and performance, and it's an effort to try to gain more authoritarian power for themselves, and that's why they're going about it this way. And I think it's just important to be blunt about that.
That is, in fact, the point, Andre. I agree with Tim. Look, I have to tell you, I'm struggling to see what it is going to take for. The Republicans on Capitol Hill are a lost cause to me. I'm not going to wait for them. But some of the business leaders that know they have the president's ear, what is it going to take for people to speak up? Because as Governor Walz laid out, first it was, we have all these examples of people that the government has targeted. But this one, obstructed justice for what? How so? In what way, shape, or form? I just think of this James Baldwin quote. He warned us that the great danger is not that people don't see what's happening. It's that they are taught to accept it. If the business community, if lay people in the streets of this country who have been speaking up, but if the business community and other leaders in this country, educational leaders, leaders at law firms who have been willing to stand up to Trump on other things, some of them not so much, but there are some bright spots out there, and I'm not just talking about Mark Elias. People have to stand up because we are not on a slippery slope to authoritarianism, baby. We are living in the opening act of Donald Trump's version of an authoritarian America, and that is not hyperbolic. The photos from Minneapolis to Chicago to right here in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, they paint the picture and they tell the story.
That's right. I mean, what does every authoritarian leader need? They need their own federal police force. They need their own kind of law enforcement agents that they can direct. We have that. And let's be really clear. Since the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, there was a fear that ICE and Border Patrol, because I hear a lot about ICE, I don't hear about Border Patrol, that these officers were overfunded, that they were not professionalized. And I have worked into 2 Democratic administrations where they have resisted basic use of force policies, basic trainings, because we were afraid to say we need to hold immigration enforcement accountable. President Trump knows exactly what he's doing with these agencies. He found 2 of the biggest law enforcement agencies, not just in the country, but really in the world. And he said, all right, I'm going to deploy them against the city, and he's letting them be free. Some of the people we see doing the most harm have worked at these agencies for decades under multiple administrations.
Like the officer who shot and killed Renee Good. He was a 10-year veteran of ICE. A 10-year veteran.
So ask, what is that culture where it just took 1 year for him to use force in that way and to adopt tactics? He got that tactic from the Border Patrol, which he served in. But all I hear right now is ICE, ICE, ICE. I want to hear about Border Patrol, about Bureau of Prisons, about the fact that Trump has taken every federal agent and sent them into the front lines to replace local police with a federal police force that is unconstitutional in and of itself. And to your point about Governor Walz and Mayor Frey, they're saying something really important. They're saying, film what you're seeing. If we hadn't seen that video of Renee Good, if we didn't read the story about a family of 6 being tear gassed, if we didn't read about that Mexican restaurant, what is Trump getting away with if we don't see that? And then what is the opposition party going to do? Because you can't just say quick things like abolish ICE or reform certain. This is a system that's been weaponized, and I don't know how we're coming back from it without a clearer vision going forward of right-sizing immigration enforcement and offering a real alternative that Americans can choose in the elections. Because we can be against this, but those agencies will continue on, those officers will continue on, and that legacy and that emboldening of what will keep happening.
Tim, right now we're talking about blue cities and blue states, but there are rumors swirling in Central Florida that there's about to be a big ICE operation there. When it comes to DeSantis's backyard, when it comes to Abbott's backyard, when all of a sudden it's the ag folks in their state saying, hi, you're decimating our workforce, or the construction industry that's saying we can't build homes without these workers. Does he listen to them?
Potentially. I mean, we've seen him talk on some of this stuff, particularly with related to the farm workers and the hospitality workers, since that's his business. He's employed plenty of undocumented immigrants over the years. But all that stuff takes time. You can do a lot of damage in the interim, right? So he already's done this in my home state, Louisiana, right? They sent a bunch of troops in. Bavino was there, a little 4'11" center for, the Border Patrol guy. He's marching around the French Quarter. And it had a real impact. It really did. I have friends who are in the construction business saying like people weren't showing up to work, like even people who were illegal because they didn't want to be hassled, right? Like it had a negative impact economically in the state. This is kind of weird to say luckily, but like unfortunately for Louisiana, like they moved all those folks to Minneapolis when this stuff exploded in Minneapolis, and now everybody says, look, everybody's back to work, right? So they can go into Florida and Texas, create a ruckus, get a scene, get the images for TV that they want, scare people, and then leave kind of before I think that pushback happens. Especially when you just see the evidence that like, look, these business leaders have not had any backbone when it comes to pushing back to them.
Before we scoot, I don't want to go without Simone. If you could just put back on the table that quote from James Baldwin.
He said the great danger is not that people don't see what's happening; it's that they are taught to accept it. And it's a quote about normalization, about power and normalizing what is happening to people in this country.
I want to humbly modify that quote, because I think in this generation, they're not taught any longer. They just accept it because they see with their own eyes. They're recording it with their own phones, and it's coming across the transit regardless of where they're getting their information. Folks in America know exactly what's happening on the streets of cities like Minneapolis. They know what's happening in states like Texas, and they damn sure know what's happening in their own neighborhoods because they're capturing it. Folks, you're not being taught, you're accepting it. And what I think the country needs now is for all of us to stop accepting it.
See a lot of people showing up in those streets who I do not think are accepting it. Andrea Flores, Tim Miller, thank you both so much. Stay with us in just a moment. We're going to get reaction to the breaking news. The Trump's Justice Department is investigating top Minnesota officials with Congressman James Walkinshaw, a member of the Homeland Security Committee. And later, Democrats are one step closer to another big redistricting win. We're going to have those details coming up. You're watching The Weeknight.
More on the breaking news. MS Now confirms Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey are being investigated by the Trump Justice Department. For what? Exactly. What are the accusations? We are endeavoring to find out more information. But today, more than 24 House Democrats attended a shadow hearing in St. Paul on Trump's violent immigration operation. Here's some of what those Democrats heard.
Parts of our city are like a ghost town, as the very presence of federal agents make them terrified to go about their daily life, and many immigrant neighbors have not left their homes in days.
The targeting, harassing, violence, and detention of Somali American is wrong. And I am worried for the safety of me, my family, and my neighbors and community.
I ask for you to do everything in your power to stop this campaign of terror so we can return to a sense of safety and normalcy.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman James Walkinshaw of Virginia. He is a member of the House Oversight and Homeland Security Committees, and the congressman was in Minneapolis for today's shadow hearing, and now he's back in Washington, D.C., a journey today.
Congressman, welcome to the table. So let's talk about what you heard today and the experience that you and your colleagues tried to put before the American people. I'm going to do a little devil's advocate here. So what? I mean, because I have a lot of folks on my side of the aisle looking at this going, well, this is more showplace. This is a fixed hearing. They got people to come in and say the thing. And I think a lot of times that attitude has to get broken. We've got to cut through that attitude, because at the heart of it, I don't believe they believe that, and I don't think they mean that. I think that they're just being fed a bunch of crap from Fox and elsewhere. To think and look at their fellow Americans who are before your committee, before this hearing. And, shadow or not, you have members of Congress coming into a community to have a conversation. That's important. And so I want to start from that perspective to sort of push back on this narrative that, well, this is all just Democrats doing what Democrats do when they're up against the wall, because the Republicans are the ones who are up against the wall, not the Democrats, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Well, first, I think for one of my Republican colleagues who's maybe thinking or saying what you just said, I wish they would have come and sat next to me in that hearing.
Well, there's that.
To hear for themselves what these everyday Americans in Minnesota are dealing with as a result of this mass deportation machine that Trump has placed on them. But I think the point is in some ways fair, because those of us who are there, we now have a responsibility to take what we learned and bring it back here to Washington and try to put it into action and try to push for some real accountability for ICE and CBP and the other agencies involved here to try to end this violence, this chaos, the reckless approach that we've seen from them. We have a responsibility to fight for that.
Congressman, one of the most alarming pieces of sound today, Simone flagged it earlier, came from the mayor of St. Paul. I want you to take a listen to what she shared.
We've received reports of federal law enforcement officers going door to door asking people where the Asian people live, right in our very own city. I myself have received advice to carry my passport with me because that they may try to target me based on what I look like as well. We are ground zero for Trump's war in America, a war on our democracy, on our freedoms, on our rights as Americans. It is in our backyard today, and it is only a matter of time before it is in yours.
Racial profiling so prevalent that a mayor of a major U.S. city is herself concerned that she could be a target of that racial profiling. And perhaps we would be surprised, Congressman, if not for the fact that that racial profiling had been sanctioned by the U.S. Supreme Court.
You know, Simone was quoting James Baldwin a few minutes ago, and when I pulled up to the Minnesota State Capitol building in St. Paul this morning, I noticed the street signs in the ring road around the Capitol is Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard. And I thought to myself, what would Dr. King think right now? What would he say right now? What would he call us to do in this moment? And Mayor Herr, who we heard from today, is the embodiment of Dr. King's dream. And we see the Trump administration explicitly targeting people across this country based on their race. The Supreme Court of the United States sanctioning it. It is disgusting and it is un-American, and it has to stop.
Congressman, these two things are not divorced. We're seeing what you heard from the residents. You heard from residents and leadership in the Twin Cities today in Minneapolis and St. Paul. You heard from Attorney General Keith Ellison. Yeah. And it's not lost on me that on the same day this hearing happened, we are now getting news that there's an investigation into the governor of Minnesota, Governor Walz, and the mayor of Minneapolis, Mayor Frey. I just have to wonder what your thoughts are on this, juxtaposing what we're just talking about. You know, the quote, the idea that I raised from James Baldwin came from an idea that's rooted in his 1963 book, The Fire Next Time. And his point is that we are conditioned as Americans to see injustice. And he was writing this in 1963. The danger is the moral adjustment to that injustice that we see and what we do about it. My concern is that Americans are being conditioned from their government that selective investigations are just how it is right now.
And look, we've seen it many times already. You can go through the list of names of clearly politicized investigations that the Trump Justice Department has embarked on. And the goal isn't necessarily, although I'm sure they would love to get a guilty verdict for Governor Walz or Mayor Frey. They won't, of course, because the investigations are absurd. But the goal is to intimidate their political opponents. Is to send a message to people like me or the mayor in the next city that ICE surges into, or the governor in the next state that ICE surges into, who's a Democrat, that if you speak out in support of your constituents, in support of the Constitution, you could be next. And look, a grand jury, an investigation creates a whole lot of problems and expenses, and who wants to go through that? So maybe you're a little bit more quiet than you otherwise would have been. That's the goal. I'm not going to bow down to that kind of bullying. I don't think a lot of Democrats are going to bow down to that kind of bullying, but that's what Trump wants.
Well, to that point, there's a piece out on MS Now talking about the fact that Democrats need to bring a knife to an ICE fight. noting, quote, right now there's no bipartisan path forward for the Department of Homeland Security. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York told reporters on Wednesday, technically Johnson doesn't need one to get a bill passed, but Senate Majority Leader John Thune of South Dakota does. Funding bills must get past the filibuster, meaning at least a handful of Senate Democrats need to be on board with each measure. So as you're looking at putting in place corrective action, we've got budgetary considerations coming up with respect to the funding of departments like DHS. What type of knife are you going to bring to that fight?
I take government funding questions very seriously. I represent 50 to 60,000 federal workers in Virginia. And I said this today at the hearing. When the DHS funding bill comes to the House, expect next week, if there aren't real restrictions to rein in ICE, I mean an end to the masking, I mean an end to officers refusing to identify themselves and not wearing badges or badge numbers, I mean warrants for detention, I mean use of force standards that are in place and enforced, and officers who violate them are disciplined. If those things aren't in the bill, I ain't going to vote for it. I ain't going to vote for it. And I voted for 5 appropriations bills already for other agencies because they were bipartisan and reined in the Trump administration. This is out of control, and we have to take a stand.
Is there a movement inside the caucus to rally with you on that
There
effort?
is. There is.
All right. Congressman James Waukesha of Virginia, we appreciate you coming on and sharing some thoughts, my man. New polling shows Trump may be losing a key coalition behind his last victory, and it could have critical consequences for the midterms. I'm going to break it down for you right here on The Weeknight.
Donald Trump's agenda is so unpopular that he is erasing the gains he made with key voting blocs in 2024. New polling from CNN shows Trump's approval among Latinos and young adults at just 30%. That's down from 41% at the start of his term. Meanwhile, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is, quote, calling his shot for a Democratic Senate majority after the midterms. Schumer told the New York Times he believes Democrats can flip Alaska, Maine, North Carolina, and Ohio while holding on to all of their current seats. Joining us now, Democratic pollster and strategist Cornell Belcher. He's an MS Now political analyst. And Morgan State University professor Jason Johnson. He is an MS Now political contributor.
Alicia, I know you couldn't see Michael while you were doing your read, but as you were reading, you saw him. He was like, they can hold these seats. I don't know, Cornell. I am of the belief that what Senator Schumer is saying is doable. I also think there are some other interesting seats on the map. I'm looking at the Mississippi Senate race. Not saying it'll be a cakewalk, but I do think that there's a chance there. The demographics in some of these places in the South are changing. Brandon Marino has found himself in the crosshairs as the president. I don't think it's because he's changed his mind. I think it's because he knows he can lose his seat come this fall because Sherrod Brown is back in Ohio. So maybe, I know the chairman has thoughts, but I have a little hope.
Well, look, I think, and the chairman knows this, if you look at what Schumer's done and done very successfully is recruiting. And part of what I think has hurt Republicans in the past is Republican recruiting with Donald Trump leading the recruiting and getting candidates way outside of the mainstream. But if you look at what Schumer's been able to do with recruiting, and recruiting matters, not national Democrats, but Democrats that fit these states. I think they've done in Alaska, they've done an excellent job. And I tell you what. Getting Governor Roy, and where I had focus group participants call him Uncle Roy because they're so favorable of him, the former governor of North Carolina, that is a really good kid. Again, Democrats who fit their states, run well in their states. Now, look, to win 4 and hold all is a tough thing.
It's a feat.
But if there's any cycle that they may be able to do it, it may be this one, because this does kind of remind me of 2006, going in 2006, where you had a very unpopular, I know you remember, a very unpopular president at the top of the ticket, and Americans really upset and looking for change. I think you see the same sort of thing happening in the electorate right now. If you look at the past special elections that we've had in this country and the off-year elections in New Jersey and Virginia, where Democrats way outperformed what they historically do in expectations, and you had mobilization of groups for an off-year that you hadn't seen before. I get this feeling that there's something else happening in this country, and I was watching MS Now yesterday, and y'all were covering the protests, and listening to people, middle-of-the-road white guy say, I've never been in a protest before, but I got mad at what I saw on television, and now I'm out here protesting. That kind of mobilization is special, and I don't know where it's going to go.
So, Dr. Johnson, one of the things I learned as a young county chairman and then as a state chairman, and certainly as national chairman, is the measurement of time and opportunity. Just for the record, a year ago, I said that the U.S. Senate would be in play come this cycle. And for a whole lot of reasons that I understood relating back to 2006, as Cornell referenced, and 2010. And so the assessment of where the Democrats go, in my estimation, understanding time and opportunity. And to Cornell's point, Chuck Schumer has done a great job of recruiting, but now Chuck Schumer needs to get out of the way and let the messaging develop and take advantage of the opportunity that's going to be presented by the time. What say you, sir?
If there is one thing that Chuck Schumer and Leader Jeffries have been very good at, it is snatching a good message from a successful organic growth and just smashing it into the ground by standing against what the public asked for. I completely agree. Look, I don't think, and I am not at all comfortable as a political scientist with the amount of crowing and victory laps that the Democratic leadership is already taking. It's January, people.
Thank you.
January. What if the economy picks up sometime in the middle of the summer? What if some other natural disaster event happens? So you got some good recruits. That's great. You still have to go out and play the game. And that's why I've been saying that they need to make sure, look, if you've got people who are saying, as I wrote about in my article, if you have candidates running on abolish ICE, hey, that probably works if you're in some place in the Midwest, because people are tired of having ICE agents show up in the Target parking lot, snatching people out of the streets, grabbing kids out of schools and everything else like that. If you have somebody who's running saying, hey, look, I want stronger border security, that's fine for a Democrat who's running in Texas. But I think that the Democrats have to make sure that they continue to fight as if they're going to lose, because if you fight like you're going to win in January, you could face all sorts of circumstances in the next couple of months that'll snatch victory away that might have been promised.
Simone, your face is disagreeing with Dr. Johnson.
Well, as the only person at the table from the Midwest, I don't think abolish ICE actually is a message for the folks in the Midwest. Well, I'm just saying, okay, we're going to give you the Midwest, even though we the Great Plains, but we'll claim you today. Y'all live over there. But I don't think abolish ICE works, but I take your point that what you are saying is you have to run from where you are. And I don't know. I've talked to a lot of not just Democrats here in Washington, D.C., but I've talked to folks across the country. Scott Cullum, who is one of the Democrats who is running for Senate in Mississippi, Scott Cullum is a very convincing candidate, okay? He's a district attorney, twice elected. That means Republicans have voted for him. The demographics in the district that he represents as the district attorney have changed substantially, but white people have voted for Scott Cullum. He might be a little more tough on crime than some other Democratic candidates across the country particularly are. But if you look at the things that he's been saying on his campaign trail, he's talking about the economy. He's talking about the issues that the people are closest to. So I don't know, Cornell. I mean, it feels like to me that I do think that the candidates understand the assignment. I don't think the media apparatus does. I think people need to get out their tables and get into the streets and talk to the people. Because if you were talking to some of these folks close to the issues, you're hearing that they know what's going on. The question is, do the DC Dems know what's going on?
Look, I won't disagree with the professor. Is you do have to run like you're losing. I think that's a given. But are the elements in place for a sea change election like we saw in 2006, right? Are the elements in place? What I would push back on, and you bring up Mississippi, and I'm glad you brought up Mississippi. When was the last time Democrats built infrastructure in Mississippi?
Well, the Democrats just broke a two-thirds supermajority in the state Senate by Republicans in this last election.
And when was the last time that Democrats really put investments in Mississippi and a lot of these states? It's been a long time. I would argue it's been a long time. But and again, that's not a negative thing. Simone, we've got to do better, right? And again, chirping my own horns for us old guys. But again, the 50-state strategy was
We know
a
how
part
to
of
win.
our ability to win in places that we hadn't won before, because we were building infrastructure, we were putting resources there, and we were recruiting, and we took advantage of the opportunity that was there. My only worry is that if we don't have a sea change election, is because we're not taking advantage of the opportunities that I think Donald Trump is presenting us with the people and putting infrastructure. I would love to see. And look, I'm going to Mississippi in 2 weeks from now to do some focus groups. I know people.
Come back after your focus
I will,
groups.
but I know, especially black people. When was the last time black people heard a lot from Democrats in Mississippi?
Well, Alicia, I would just say Kamala Harris was down in Jackson this week. Rahm Emanuel was down in Jackson. It's a lot of would-be Democratic candidates hitting up Mississippi. So I don't know why Rahm was there. Y'all, we might need to ask Rahm Emanuel. I don't know.
There's a word that Cornell used, and that's opportunity. And I think, Michael Steele, one of those opportunities that Donald Trump has left for Democrats to exploit is what is currently happening with health care, because he promised voters, he's been promising voters for a long time, he's going to come up with some plan. This is what we got instead. Trump repackaging random ideas into great health care plan. His video unveiling this proposal was an odd pastiche of boasts about what he's already done in the health care arena and wild claims about how incredibly good and cheap health care will soon be. He failed to even mention the biggest problem Obamacare was created to address, the refusal of insurers to provide coverage for people with pre-existing conditions or inherently expensive treatments. It's not just, Michael, that the vibes are bad. It's that the policy is not delivering.
Well, it isn't, and I think that goes. I think that goes to the heart of what Jason wrote in his piece about how the Democrats run, in this case specifically against ICE. But even if you widen that lens, Jason, issues like the economy, issues certainly like healthcare, given what people are going through right now, also buffet the arguments that you make in your piece, where you know Trump isn't popular, and that the midterm elections are happening with an obvious bad guy, right? That it can be the focus for a lot of Democrats. To your broader point, that can play in the Midwest, that can play in the Southeast, can play out west, the Northeast. How does that play overall when you look at an issue like health care and the economy and affordability?
You got three big issues, right? You have things aren't affordable. You have healthcare is skyrocketing, and you have a president that doesn't seem to care. Now, the other part that is beneficial as a messaging tactic for the Democrats is you can never go wrong running against the government. And that's one of the things I was talking about with ICE. At the same time that you're telling people that you're spending $7 for, a dozen eggs, you can say, you know what? ICE salaries are starting at 6 figures. ICE guys are getting a $50,000 signing bonus. ICE guys are getting their college loans paid off, but the Republicans said they won't do that for you. You can run against this as a bad government agency. You can run against this as, for all the things that DOJ got rid of, they didn't get rid of this. There are ways that you can signal that you are a good government, efficient, affordability Democrat, and appeal to the left that is frustrated. And to your point that you guys were mentioning earlier, this is a ripe opportunity. Historically, it's the second year of his new presidency, et cetera, et cetera. But what you're also looking at is this: the Epstein files. The amount of just working class white men who feel that they've been lied to. I think it's very telling that the gentleman at the Ford plant who yelled at Donald Trump was yelling at him about the Epstein files. And that guy is a Republican-leaning voter. Those men are out there to be gotten right now. You can tell those guys, hey, you're working your butt off right now, and this ICE agent guy can't even pass a physical exam and is getting $100,000 a year. You don't want that in your government anymore. So I think there's an opportunity there if you have a combined message. But again, you can't have Chuck Schumer or Leader Jeffries stomping on anything organic. If the people want to abolish ICE, let them say it. If the people want to talk about affordability, let them say it. Don't tell the voters what they want. Listen to what they're asking for you.
Well, we will be listening. Cornell, come back after your focus groups. Jason Johnson, I don't want the Midwest people to think I wasn't being tongue-in-cheek, even though the Great Plains, we still do claim it all day long.
This is called clean up on Mount 9.
Go Big Red. Ahead, folks, Trump suffers yet another blow on the redistricting front. We're going to break down the big news for Virginia Democrats. Keep it here on The Weeknight.
Big news out of Virginia today, where lawmakers advanced a proposal that will let voters consider a redistricting measure. Now, if successful, Democrats could net as many as 4 House seats in the Commonwealth. But if Trump had his way, well, he wouldn't even have elections. Telling Reuters, quote, "It's some deep psychological thing, but when you win the presidency, you don't win the midterms." He boasted that he had accomplished so much that, quote, "when you think of it, we shouldn't even have an election." The White House, of course, says Trump was just joking.
Was he joking about trying
Really?
to seize the election machines?
He was just joking.
Was he joking about January 6th? Let me just say kudos to the Democrats in Virginia. This was only possible because Virginia Democrats have continued to win elections at the state level. I continue to say the states is where the game is, folks. America's policy is made in the state legislature. We had questions on our call earlier today about the maps. In the break, I called a senior Democrat in leadership in Virginia, and they said that these maps, if they pass from the people, they, in fact, will be in effect for the 2026 election. And this process that they have then set up will be effect in 26, 2028, 2030. And then after the 2030 cycle, where the redistricting should really be happening once in a decade for the census, they will go back to their bipartisan election commission, redistricting commission model. But this senior state Democrat said to me, either it's an existential threat to democracy or it's not. Alicia, they seem to be in lockstep in Virginia.
It is amazing to me on that list that you gave us, Simone, about the many ways in which this president has threatened democracy and specifically our elections. Michael, one of those ways was supposed to be redistricting, and it would seem increasingly that the joke is on him.
Yeah, it is, but he's not done. So I don't rest on the laurels of the success of a Virginia effort or California or anywhere else. You look at the trend lines. Yes, Cook political report says 18 seats has shifted. My analysis says that there's more than that, but it is January. And to the points made earlier in our last segment that, voters will be buffeted by the winds of political change that may occur in the economy, that may occur as a result of some international event. So there's a lot of ground still to cover for Democrats, but they are positioned well. And that's my point about the Senate and certainly my point about the House. And certainly what Simone has leveled up, now adding these 4 seats to maybe the 18 that are already shifted, the 4 that you see in California, there's a good trend line for Democrats and Republicans. Guess what? You invited all of this, so, they're bringing votes to that fight that you wanted to have.
Well. Coming up on All In.